Advisory Committee. We've got 2 hours for the meeting today if we need it. So welcome all. We'll start as we usually do with a calling of the roll. So Andy, can you please call the roll? And that of course includes our ex officio members.
Of course. All right, I'm gonna, as usual, go through the names here. Please respond in the affirmative if you're present. Chad Washington. All right, Bob Van Dyke.
Present.
Kristen Regard.
I'm here.
Keith Curtis.
Here.
Brian Caparata.
Here.
Andrew Perkey.
Present.
Mark Stern.
Here.
Mark Granbremer. Mark Granbremer. Let me see if he's in the waiting room, guys. Just a quick second here. Only got so many screens. He is not in the waiting room. Alrighty. Jennifer Weichel.
Here.
Kate Wells.
Here.
Chris Allen.
Present.
Sarah Gregory.
Present.
All right, great. It looks like everyone except Chad and Mark are here, but we do have a quorum, Bob, to move forward.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that, Andy. I'm now going to call for an approval of the agenda, which will require a motion for approval in a second. I do want to note one change, though, to the agenda on the item number 5. Those were accidentally, the final draft was actually omitted from the packet and was just posted today to the website. So in the interests of transparency for the public, we'll instead, during that item, talk about the next step of the public comment period, and then we'll formally endorse the PFAs at the next meeting. So anyway, just want to note that one change to the agenda. Having said that, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
A second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Moved in second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, I'll consider the agenda approved. We'll now go to the consent agenda, for which there was only one item, was the meeting minutes, which were posted online. Do I hear are there any objections, any comment on the consent agenda item, the meetings? Does anybody want to pull that off because of concerns and move it over to the next meeting? Okay, is there any objection to moving forward with the approval? Okay, hearing none, I'll consider the meeting minutes approved from May 2023. Let's go now to item number 3, please, public comment. Andy, are there any public comment requests today?
At this time, nothing was sent to us via email for a public request beforehand, but as usual, if anyone's online, and please feel free to raise your hand virtually, type in the chat if you'd like for any public comment at this point. And I'm trying to keep an eye out. Does not look like we have any.
Okay, it looks like no public comment at this meeting. Thank you, Andy. Let's now go to the staff report, where we'll have a regular update from Sarah on the budget. I had asked Sarah specifically about what kind of funding level we should have available. We do have available for the first tranche of funding here in the fall. So I think she wants to talk to us a little bit about that. And then Andy will talk about the document timeline update. So Sarah, please.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, Bob and members of the committee, and Andy. Thanks for the question. Really timely question for us to be thinking about, how much money do we have, what's going on with the budget, and then as we're sort of forecasting our potential needs for the fall solicitation, ballpark, what sort of amount do we want to be shooting for in offering, in that first offering? So I'll just use kind of broad brush strokes here because I think it meets the purpose of this discussion, but we can get into greater detail if anybody wants. As if you'll recall, there was $10 million in general fund deposited into the PFA sub-account with the passage of Senate Bill 1501 in, last year. Since that time, we have also received about $900,000 in harvest tax distributions, as well as some interest associated with the account. And so the revenue from the 21-23 biennium is around 10.9 million. We have had some expenditures associated with staff and just small administrative costs. And so we think our estimated fund balance carryover is about 10.89. Add to that what we anticipate to be coming our way if Senate Bill 5509, which is ODFW's budget bill, if that is passed this session, and we all know why I say if, because it's been uncertain at best this session, that would bring another 10 million in general fund into the account. So to be converted into other fund once it's deposited into the sub account. So in total, we're looking at having about 20.8 million in the fund come September, October of this year. However, if you recall the way Oregon budgets work, not only are we allocated funds, but we also have to be given authority to spend those funds, what we refer to as expenditure limitation. With Senate Bill 5509, we are given $12 million in expenditure limitation, with this understanding that as we need more funds, more limitation can be provided to the department for these expenditures if requested of legislature. So we really, with how late things are at this point, and by the time the governor signs the budget and allocations are made to the agencies, we don't anticipate the opportunity to go back and request additional limitation until probably February. So we view that 12 million limitation as kind of the limitation that we'll have available to us in September when we go forward. I'll pause there because I see Heath has a question or comment.
So 2 questions. One, that understanding you described, would that request for additional expenditure limitation be made to the e-board, or are you anticipating it would be made to the legislature in the short session?
Legislature in the short session.
So you don't anticipate needing more than that in the interim. If we approved a bunch of grants this fall, it is unlikely you think that we would need to expend more than the 12 million prior to February.
That's what I'm thinking, Heath. So we took into account anticipated administrative costs for this fall, including like grant management software, Andy's time, the assistant's time. We padded a high estimate for what we expect from DOJ costs for their reviews of various agreements and templates, et cetera. So we think it's reasonable to target something around 10 million for the first solicitation if the committee wanted to go that high. You wouldn't have to. There's, as Bob would say, there's lots of different knobs you can turn in your consideration. We'd like to, offer that up to you all for discussion on what you think a reasonable dollar limit would be for the first RFP. Recognizing that you have 20.8 million in the fund, you will have additional years, that you will have harvest tax revenue continuing to come in. There will be some interest coming in, which we're still trying to tabulate. but there is some uncertainty about 25, 27. And so how do you want to meter out the funds available to you? Going big at first, being conservative. I mean, those are all some of the dials and knobs for you all to turn as you kind of weigh where what you'd like to offer in the first round.
And is the,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Bob, if one more, if that's okay.
Yep, please.
Is there a reason that the harvest tax number came in low relative to the 2.5 million? Is that just lag?
That's what I'm thinking. It's lag, and that's just 1 year.
Well,
Right?
Agreed, but if I recall correctly, it was supposed to be 2.5 million per year. That was what we calculated it off of up until the HCP issues, and then it's 5 million per year. And maybe it's just lagging and it's what's come in.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, I guess I'd be eager for some reactions from folks here. I think what's on the table is that we've got a $12 million expenditure limit that we could enact directly, maybe 10 or so, Sarah suggested at the first round here in the fall. If we wanted to get more than that, go more toward the 20 million that's available, we'd have to go back to the legislature. So there's some complexity associated with that, as well as uncertainty. Obviously, if we spend it all, we may not have funding as much in the next tranche. So we'd have at least 10 million the following year, as well as potentially funding available for urgent grants as well, which of course are part of the program. So Kristen, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand with the expenditure limit, is that triggered at the point that we commit to grantees? Or is that triggered at the point at which they spend the funds and invoice us for that expense?
It's triggered more at the, I think at the invoice stage, it's actual expenditures. However, I don't know, this is me getting a little bit out of my depth. I don't know that it wouldn't be good practice for us to commit in grants more than what we've been given in expenditure limitation, even though the actual invoice isn't going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think where I was just trying to think it through is related to what administrative expenses we might incur and hoping to understand those in full. So that's what I was thinking about. And the timing that those might be incurred relative to when, people are invoicing us for work completed. So thank you.
Yes, and that's a good question. I think at least some of the administrative expenditures will occur prior to us getting invoiced for anything on the grant side.
Mark, please, and thoughts welcome on what we should go with in the first round here from everyone too. Mark Stern, please.
Yeah, I guess as I think about that, I'm wondering if Sarah, you or Andy or others have any idea what the appetite is for this RFP that would be released in terms of is 10 million going to get gobbled up with more good projects than we can possibly envision, or are people going to be sort of getting up to speed and maybe a little slower to get in the queue?
That's kind of the question that we've been tossing around ourselves, is what to expect. And it's hard. There's a lot of interest, especially from Colt, some conservation districts also. I would expect a good amount of applicants. The fact that we have no ceiling or floor for funding, I don't think there's really any way to say what we're going to get yet until we just open it up and maybe reassess once we open it and start receiving those project proposals at that point, and seeing how much we want to spend and how many of those projects we want to fund. I'd be hesitant unless Sarah, you want to add anything, but it's kind of a curveball right now. I'm not sure.
No, but Mark, I think your question gets at something you've raised before, which is, do we want to do some sort of like testing the waters or assessment of interest? And we have not contemplated that with the committee.
Yeah, I guess I just wondered, Heath or Fran, if you have any sense from the industry perspective or private landowner perspective, if there's like people are talking about it, if there's interest in projects, or Chris Allen or Kate from the federal agency perspectives and the various recovery plans or restoration efforts, that there's projects that you have a sense people are going to be ready to jump on, and I realize people may not know. I guess I'm just trying to get a feel for what others might be seeing or thinking.
I don't. I don't have any intel on industrial applicants.
Yeah, same here. That hasn't been shared with me. A lot of times, kind of do this work in-house already. But I'll keep my ears open.
Chris Allen?
Yeah, just an answer to your question, Mark. I've been doing some outreach with some of our typical partners, especially with bull trout, but some other species as well. Just putting the word out regarding the opportunity coming up this fall, but I haven't really asked them or inquired in terms of their interest in the program and potential proposals. So I can't really answer that at this point.
Heath, please.
So just a question for you, Bob, like, where do you see this number appearing? That is to say, the reason I ask is it necessary that we make this decision now? It seems likely to me we could advertise with the understanding that this program receives this amount of money from the legislature, and that when we get all of the applications in, however many there are, it seems likely to me that we would be in a position at that point to decide how much we wanted to spend. Like, it may be that we have very few high quality applications and we fund only those, or we may have a great deal and have to make some hard decisions. But do you think it's necessary that we make a decision now regarding how much money, a cap, I guess is what you're proposing, on how much money we would be willing to spend this fall?
I don't think it's necessary. I think the only decision we'd have to make is if we thought that the 12 million was not enough and we needed to get moving toward asking the legislature to make the expenditure limit higher. That's the only thing that it seems to me there'd be any kind of demand or urgency. I think we could, as you say, simply note the amount that is available per biennium, per the PFA, and that we, welcome proposals. So
right. And then if we got some like real valuable proposals that it seems extremely unlikely to me that we would not have to commit out of the gate if we were over our 12 million, and we could tell them, hey, this is a great proposal. In order for us to fund it, we're going to need more spending limitation, which we will go get, and we'll keep you posted on how that goes. I don't know. I think it seems likely to me that in the fall, we could kind of take it on the come.
from others, to me, that's fine. I think it's good that we've had this conversation so people know sort of the dimensions of the puzzle there, the total amount that we've now got, and the expenditure limit we'd need to change. Other thoughts on this question, whether we need anything formally in the proposal about a cap on the availability? That's really the question I think he's calling there. Fran, any thoughts on that one? Any thoughts on the cap? No. Mark?
I like that approach because I think we'll have a much better idea of who's interested and what the scope and scale of the interest is. And then obviously, as he says, if we get a lot of projects, it gives us some really good leverage and reason to ask the legislature for an increase in the expenditure limitation. So I kind of like that approach.
Kate, please.
And in my recent experience, our restoration center just put out notices of funding opportunities recently, and like millions and millions of dollars are going out the door for that funding program. And there seems to be a very direct correlation between the amount of interest or applicants that we get to the amount and type of kind of advertising that we do to put it out on the street, that the money is there. And what we learned from those exercises was that we need to do a better job of that. And we need to make it more well known that some staff, I don't know if it's ODF&W or what, it is available to help applicants craft their applications, because some of them are just not very savvy in that respect, and they need a lot of hand-holding and guidance, and they need to know how to navigate that process and where they can find the resources to do that. So all of those factors, I think, led in the chain reaction of what we did and didn't get, and what we were and weren't able to give higher or lower scores, that kind of thing. So yeah, how we get the word out about this opportunity, I think, is really important in that respect.
Sarah, please.
I appreciate that, Kate, and I think it's an awesome segue, because we do have our information and education folks listening into this, and so that can be part of our conversation with them. I just wanted to point out, because it seems relevant in this discussion, that Andy and I were just brainstorming. We heard from you all this desire to hear what are the priorities, and what kinds of projects are out there that would likely be great candidates for this program. And we're trying to line up presentations for you all at the coming meetings from Fish Division, Wildlife Division, and Habitat Division, but pairing those with our partner agencies. And Andy, I don't know if you're teeing that up later, because I don't want to steal your thunder now, or should I just describe it briefly?
You can describe it now. It wasn't. Yeah.
So here's what we're thinking, and this is all just brainstorming, so it's up to revision. But if we had, for example, NOAA and our Fish Division presenting together, let's say at the July meeting, and then maybe the Fish and Wildlife Service and Wildlife Division presenting together at August, and then our water program and maybe ODF would like to be there as well to talk about HCP. Like, we could sort of trot out for you some discussions of what are those priority projects. Certainly we could ask those questions of like ballpark, dollar amount, what are we talking about here? And that may help us as a committee also begin to scope what we could anticipate. It's also a great opportunity for the public to hear what are some of those priorities, so that they can be thinking about that in terms of what grants they might intend to submit. So just wanted to put that on everyone's radar as something that we've been scheming as a way to begin to wrap our arms more about what might come in the fall offering.
So thanks for that, Sarah. Maybe we should go to Andy, and the other item here was him giving us some update on the document timeline, sort of what's coming down the pike for the committee. But I think there's been a good discussion. Does anyone else who hasn't chimed in yet have a comment on the, it feels to me where we ended up was we're not going to have a cap. We'll just note the overall funding per biennium that's available approximately through the program, and then we'll see what comes in. And we can go from there. We may make fewer grants, we may make more if there's a real marquee program, or we may even, as Heath noted, be pushed to go back to the e-board more quickly to try to get some funding available for something that seemed extraordinary or desirable to fund. Any other comments on that summary? Okay, well, let's transition over then. Thank you, Sarah, for noting those upcoming things. I know we've been thinking about trying to get some priorities. Andy, why don't you talk a little bit about what's coming up in the document timeline update, which is another topic for the upcoming meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So I know I'll keep this somewhat short. Just want to paint a picture of some documents where they're going to be. And also just kind of thank everyone for the hard work up to this point. We've done a lot of work in very few months. So thank you to the working groups, especially for taking the time out of your day to help build the documents so we can have a meaningful discussion in these meetings. So as we discussed, OARs have been filed with Secretary of State. I will send that updated draft later today to the committee. My apologies again for leaving that out of the pre-meeting review packet. They are posted online, but it is filed with Secretary of State for the August 4th commission meeting. Essentially, and then we have the operating procedures that have been adopted. Those will get posted on our committee webpage, which is still undergoing some developments. We hope to relaunch that page sometime in the near future here and make it a little bit more user-friendly. I know it can be difficult to navigate now, and I apologize for that. But under the landing page, I'll be updating the resources page to having our OARs, our operating procedures, and the next few documents I'm going to talk about. So we really essentially kind of have two fundamental documents and processes to still finalize. The first being, well, one of them being the grant guidelines and solicitation, which you've all seen a very rough draft for. I sent that out with the pre-review meeting packet last week. I'm hoping that we can have a discussion with that next month, pending on what we get discussed today. That grant guidelines, again, it's a very, very rough draft, but essentially it's a one-stop shop for applicants. It's a summary of the grant program, of all the documents we've worked on up to this point. It's something that when we launch our solicitation, applicants will be able to pick up and know how to apply, eligibility, everything from A to Z. The next thing that we're going to have to wrap up and finalize, we're beginning that discussion today in more detail with the committee as a whole, is our grant evaluation process. And that process involves a few different documents. So that involves the project application cover page. It involves the scope of work, the questions that we're going to be having applicants fill out. It also involves a few worksheets. So those are review worksheets by the committee, review and evaluation worksheets by the committee, and by our technical review teams. So that's kind of the grant evaluation process in its entirety. It's about 4 different documents we'll be working on. So that's what we have coming up, at least for the summer months for the documents. We've got a lot of work, close past the starting line, at least. I am pretty confident we're still on track for a fall solicitation as we planned. But with that, that's kind of all I wanted to provide an update for. We're going to get into more discussion later about the grant evaluation process. But at this point, I kind of just wanted to open it. Did anyone have any questions about the documents, clarification needs? Now's the time to please ask away. Mark?
Yeah, one other document that had been floating around and people have been commenting on was the expenditure framework. So I'm just curious what the status of that is.
So the expenditure framework, sorry guys, my computer just swapped screens on me. So the expenditure framework, I should be sending that out shortly. It's pretty much wrapped up in the final. I just wanted to check any edits that anyone might have added in that from the group. But as my understanding, we should be at the final draft after this meeting, and then hopefully next month we can endorse it.
Yeah, okay. It's just, I guess, just sharing my perspective a little. It's been a little hard to track the different ones, and it'd be really helpful if we have this committee, I forget what you call it, but web page or landing page where we can see all those different documents, because it's been a little challenging to understand which is the most current version of which one all rolled up, and there's a lot.
I'll update that today for everyone. Definitely by this week, our landing page will have updated drafts and whatnot for all of you. Definitely understandable.
And are those to the public or just the committee?
That's what I was trying to see, how I can create something and share. It'd probably be best to make a Google folder maybe for the committee. That might be easiest for everyone. I'm going to think that through, but did you have any recommendation, Mark, on what you'd like to see there? Would you like to see kind of 2, one for the committee? one for public.
I think it'd be helpful to have one for the committee where, because we have documents going back and forth and people are making comments on them. And if we all had one place to go for the most current version, and that would be really helpful, at least for me.
Okay, I'll fix something up so that we can have it all housed in one place, and I'll just always point people to that new folder. And I'll figure out what will work with everyone's emails. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that sounds good, Andy. We've talked about that a little bit, trying to just rationalize our document flow process and document management process here. So thanks for that. Okay, well, let's go on to the next item. We've got a couple guests here today. Well, actually, I'm sorry. The next item was the MAC endorsement of the PFA OARs. As I mentioned, we're going to put that off to the next meeting because those weren't posted until today. But Sarah, can you just give us an update about what you've learned on where we are with the OAR process, the public comment process, and some of the dates associated with that?
Yes, I can do that. So with the Secretary of State filing, we can consider the latest draft of the OARs open for public comment. We will be getting a link from the Secretary of State with where the public can find that filing. And we will share that out with the committee. We will send it to Andy's growing email listserv, and we will post it to the website. Couple deadlines to be aware of. As you know, the commission will consider approval of the final on August 4th. So in order, we have to kind of backdate from there. In order for public comment, this is for all of our listeners here, in order for public comment to be considered for potential incorporation into the final draft, we need to have that comment sent to Andy by the end of this month, by June 30th. The public has the opportunity to continue to submit comment up to the commission meeting, but past that June 30th deadline, it's not likely that we will be able to consider and potentially incorporate any of that feedback into the final draft, because on July 5th, it needs to go to the Department of Justice for review. So we're looking at having pretty much a final version of at least of what's going to go before the commission. Now, the commission will then have that version in their packets that they're looking at on the bench on August 4th, but they will also have all of the public comment received. And they could take into consideration some of that public comment received and make changes there on the bench. But for those who sort of think they might have something substantive that they would like to see incorporated for the commission's consideration, really be focused on that June 30th deadline and get those comments into Andy. So that's what I can offer in terms of the public comment process. And then I will pass it back to you, Bob, in terms of how that fits in with the committee's desire to endorse.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. I guess I just a clarification. So the commission can change it if they want to. Obviously, I wouldn't imagine they could do some kind of gut and stuff or dramatic change, but they could make minor changes. Is that correct at the August 4th meeting?
They could.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that clarification. Well, so just for the committee to know, then there'll be some comments coming in. I guess the question is do we as a committee want to do anything about them? So, we anticipated, we can just go ahead and maybe we could have a presentation at the July meeting of any comments that had come in at the July MAC meeting. And, at that point, we could discuss if we wanted to make any suggestions of our own. And so we can endorse. We may just endorse what went to the Secretary of State, but if there are comments that seemed really caught something that we wanted to call to the attention of the commission, we could do that at our July meeting. Does that work for you, Sarah? Does that make sense, given the timeline?
It does. We will have We will have already submitted the final draft to Department of Justice on July 5th. But we would be happy to provide you with a presentation of kind of a summary of what we heard from the public at your July meeting.
Yeah, and then I think that will be a time where the committee can endorse, provide an endorsement. Again, if there was something really important that we felt was missed or left out, that would be we might do something there. Obviously, we can't close that door in advance, and we don't know what the public's going to say. So, any objections to that? Just moving this forward and getting a report on public comment? Any concerns about that approach at our July meeting? But until then, we'll just rely on Andy and you, Sarah, to compile whatever comments come in and provide those to us. Okay. Well, hearing no objections, let's track that for the next meeting. That's it for the OARs then. We're getting close, and happily, we're still on track for the August 4th date. So let's Andy, could you please welcome our guests? Well, all welcome the guests. Could you please introduce the guests? And I know this has been an area of interest for the committee, and so we've got some time on this agenda item today to discuss this important issue. It's something Kate just flagged for the federal grant efforts that are going out, the importance of outreach. So please, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. All right, well, today we're going to have a presentation from ODFW's Information and Education. The presenters are going to be Amanda Sola and Adam Baylor. They are both here popping up on my screen. And yeah, just as Bob just said, we're going to discuss a little bit about their roles, some ideas that we've been discussing, and then hopefully some opportunity for engagement with the committee at this point to learn a little bit more about what you guys may want. You guys, Amanda or Adam, one of you may share your screen if you'd like to.
We're going to do it a little different. We're not going to share screen. You get to stare at our mugs.
Perfect. No problem at all. I will hand it off to you guys.
Andy, do you want to take down the slide for that purpose then?
Yep, it should be coming down right now in more of a gallery view.
Okay. Thank you guys for the opportunity to come address the committee today. It's we're looking forward to being able to dig in deeper and do more of this work as we further ourselves along in this PFA journey of ours. I'm going to go on a limb here and assume that everyone is generally familiar with the Star Wars film franchise. Luke Skywalker is the protagonist, the hero. The plot line generally revolves around him. He goes on some epic quests, that he needs to endeavor upon, and he's functionally the champion that we're intended to rally behind, right? Now, for every Luke, there's also Yoda. Okay, so who's Yoda? Well, aside from the fact that he's like this green creature of unknown origin that's at least 800 years of age, he's also very much the master of his domain. He is functionally the expert advisor for all the Jedis. He's the expert teacher, and he's also the expert guide. Now, Adam and I certainly aren't green, and last time I checked, we weren't 800 plus years old, despite the snap, crackle, pop that happens in my body when I get up in the morning. We do, however, have decades of experience in the communications realm, as does the team that we will also lean on in part of this process to support PFA and all the great work that you guys are going to be continuing to do. Our job is, and honing that expertise has been exclusively on becoming expert advisors, teachers, and guides to help you with the communications and engagement aspects of the work you do. So that's our domain. So micro intro for who I am. As Andy mentioned, my name is Amanda Soya. I am the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator at ODFW in the Information and Education Division. So words, right? Functionally, I'm a marketing communication strategist. My job is to help you guys do the storytelling in a way and pick strategies for that storytelling alongside my colleagues that help you move the needle where you want to move it and help you resonate with the audiences that you're intending to connect with. That's my job. And I have a wonderful stable of colleagues that I get to work with, including Adam. Adam, you want to take a minute to introduce yourself real quick, and then I'll get back to it?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully y'all can hear me all right. My name is Adam Baylor. I'm a public affairs specialist. Been with the agency about 4 years, and one of the things that we're looking at helping with is PFA and how we can do some of this outreach. Started up with OCRF as one of the staff members kind of helping with that. Good to see you again, Mark. So I think we've learned a lot on the OCRF front on how to really kind of communicate to the public what funds are available. And we've learned a lot. I think we've got about 15 minutes here or less to share with you some of those things. And really, I think having a conversation about what your needs are and kind of explaining how we can help connect the dots on some key things, particularly in promoting your RFP and really kind of discovering a little bit of who's out there, who needs the funds, and how we can communicate to them. So I'll pause there, and I think we had a few things we wanted to cover. So
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so let's talk about heroes and stories again. So PFA, the work that the Mitigation Advisory Committee is doing, what the grant awardees, eventual grant awardees, the work that they do, you all in that work is the heroes or are the heroes of this story, right? The heroes are the focal point. It's really what the plot and all the work we need to be doing from our communications, perspective needs to revolve around Adam's job, the rest of us in information and education, we're simply playing a supporting role as your expert guide in communications and engagement. That's our job. So if we're thinking about this journey, right, that we're going to make, this adventure we're embarking upon together, where are we now? Well, obviously, we're joining you here in the launch of the PFA Mitigation Fund. And right now, we're very much still in the planning and preparation phase for this big journey, right? We're still getting a lot of the structures in place. Rules are still being determined, how you guys want to go about all of the basis for the grant, the solicitations, all of these decisions are still in the process. So we do the same thing in the communications pathways. And it's important that we're strategically considering all the logistics and all of the needs for this long journey that we're going on so that we can make sure that when we begin trekking along, we're staying on plan and we're staying on course. And that's going to help us make sure we get where we actually want to go. So what are the four kind of basic buckets of these things that we're thinking about with our communications effort? They're general, they're large. Awareness, education, participation, and advocacy. Okay? Awareness generally about PFA, about the mitigation fund, what is it, why it exists, what are the benefits that befall the creation of the program and for those that should choose to participate in it. Education, certainly about providing the how to, where to, all of the 411 on the grant process, applying for it, making sure that we're disseminating resources and developing those resources to aid folks in the doing of their work. These are training the landowners, helping to convey information from the stream biologists and the beaver biologists and the importance of the work that they're doing. Participation, that comes in several forms, but the most critical one right now is we want to see people applying for grants. We also want people submitting grants, attending meetings, generally engaging with us, opening that feedback opportunity. And through this process of our storytelling and the asset development and dissemination, we will be able to achieve advocacy. It grows in time. And this is going to help us in sharing the successes that have been achieved along the way. So inspiring participants, inspiring stakeholders, partners, other beneficiaries of the grant projects themselves. We want those successes to be able to showcase through their networks and for people to feel confident to do that. This is going to be a huge portion of one of the roles that we're going to be asking you guys to independently play in this process for us. Okay, so now we sort of know where we're going, but how do we actually join you in this process? Where do we come in as your guide? Well, let's start with providing a map and a compass to this. Let's help navigate this. One of the things that we've been working on independently at ODFW is the development of a site map, the website map. It's functionally the model that for all the website's content. It's designed to help both users and the search engines understand all the content that's there. And it's also kind of like merging a little bit with an organizational chart. It's all of the functional items that fall there under each of those categories. These are the links. These are the resources. This is all of the content. We're designing that alongside with our ODFW team, filling in all those content, filling in all those resources, attending to the places where we are going to be growing into to make sure that we have a framework built into the site to accommodate the program's growth. We're developing communications plans. This is also going to help us because it'll help us identify for you all what many of those supplies and tools are going to be needed along that journey. So this might be a key message framework. You could think of that as like mini elevator speeches. This could be talking points to make sure we're all singing from the same songbook as we're going out and conversing with our networks and bringing people into the fold. This could be video asset development, press releases, other forms of media relations. Those are some of the supplies and tools I'm mentioning. We're not going to leave you in this process. It's not like we dump a map on your hands and then exit stage left. Our job is to partner with you through this process. So we'll be here to continue to help navigate this and really enjoy the ride along with you to see all of the wonderful projects that come to fruition. We're looking forward to being able to share those. So as we get kind of that framework all built out, what are we talking about? What are we sharing? What's going into the storytelling? Well, as we go through this adventure, we're going to find treasures, right? We're all going to become treasure hunters. And so Adam is an expert at treasures. And one of the things that he's going to talk about today is what treasure are we looking for? Who are the treasure hunters themselves? And where can it be found? And more importantly, why is the treasure so helpful? Like, why do we want treasure? So take it away, Adam.
Okay. Hopefully folks can hear me. I know some folks are having a little bit of an issue with the microphone there. So do we need to kind of check in?
You're coming in loud and clear, Adam.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Amanda kind of delivered that to a point where it's I think really going to be important for you all to work directly with Andy on what your needs are, and I guess what are some of those treasures or things that we're looking for. Content creation is going to be really helpful. One thing I've noticed with Oregon Conservation Rec Fund and other sort of information products we're trying to create that have a dollar sign to them, they have numbers to them. People just don't pick up on those. So the storytelling is going to be quite helpful to drive some traffic to what you're looking to do. So yeah, good imagery would be a treasure. And I know starting to see that in some of the presentations and some of the work we've done with Andy already and talking about getting you all lined up for success. And there's a lot of good imagery. And I know from some of your organizations, I've checked out some of your websites and this is obvious. So how we get that imagery, be it a photo and then video, is going to be important. You're already talking about Google Drive, so let's use that. But at the end of the day, it's leveraging this group to see what are those important stories, how much imagery we can get, and then what resources we have over here at ODFW in terms of putting that together for you in a timely manner. So yeah, you got a good website going. That's going to be super helpful. And then just knowing that we have extra staff, like a graphic designer we're in the process of hiring for, We've got our web team. It's always pretty responsive. And Andy's already kind of learned the ins and outs of that. I primarily do news releases for you all. So anything you can come up with in terms of, kind of newsworthy news pegs other than your standing meetings, that'll be helpful, I think, to get the word out. But just kind of checking back in with the committee over time on how we can continue to improve and looking at that comms plan. Even things like print strategies, mail strategies, I think is all going to come together over time as we get more into the weeds on this. So I guess I'm going to pause there and see about where we're at on time, and just kind of, I want to open it to questions and make sure we haven't really missed anything. Just kind of, this is more about the process instead of really kind of figuring out what are the things you need right now.
Well, yeah, we're short on time, but I definitely want to let the committee have some time to chime in. And obviously, I assume we could follow up separately as we needed to if some of the committee members had questions or needed some more time. We could work through Andy. But let's open the floor now. Does anyone have some questions or comments they'd like to? Mark, please.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation there, both Amanda and Adam. That was really helpful. You both referenced a communications plan, and I guess I was just trying to figure out if that's something that's imminent. Is that something that's sort of on the radar screen as sooner, or something on the to-do list out in the future? Just sort of where you see that landing in terms of timing.
Yeah, I think Andy got a bit of a jump on that when he came on board, and really kind of surprised me. More than most folks actually was like, hey, look at all these things in this comms plan. And so I think it's something we could share at one point. It's just more of a working document. But it really does take a good look at what y'all's needs are, and then what resources we have. That's a big part of it. So
yeah, I'll jump on the back end there, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I was actually hoping to share that out after this kind of introductory meeting. That draft communication plan, it's a few pages, talks about our audience, the message we want to get out, the key goals and ideas. And as Adam said, I started drafting this months ago. It's changed, it's evolved as we've had more discussion, but I do think it's at a point that's ready to be received by the committee in the next few months here, most definitely.
Yeah, I would agree. There's more that needs to be done in terms of like strategic development and measurement applied to the work that's being done in there, and then time frame set for a lot of these deployments. And much of that is still kind of in motion as we're trying to figure out exactly when a lot of these things that you guys are intending are going to be launching. So yes, everything that everybody else said, but it's still a little pending.
I guess, thank you for that. I think it'd be helpful for me. I mean, what we have dead ahead, and we do know, is that we're going to do a September solicitation to ask people to apply for a substantial amount of money, up to $10 million we'll have or more potentially available. So, knowing how you guys, I think we could use some help getting the word out. I think so far it's been fairly insular with, us contacting people we know, Andy starting to do a couple presentations and build a list, but I'm assuming that's something the outreach folks could do, is help build interest or awareness of this grant making opportunity. So for me, if you are building an outreach or communication plan, that September solicitation date feels like a good anchor, a target to be getting out information, as well as having landing page ready so that, the web page is ready to, at that point, to have people interact with it and engage it in a way. So we've got that solid. And then in terms of, it seems to me we'd be interested, or folks are going to be interested in communicating about the grants that we've done. That's when we make the grants, and that'll be in the new year, somewhere in the first quarter, I think. So that seems like to me another key moment where we want to have a plan about really announcing the investments that we're making, and in light of the Forest Accord and its support for the Forest Accord efforts. So anyway, I think those feel like real key dates we have already. It'll be good to see some planning, even tentatively, that, you know, anchored what was going to happen to make those as successful as possible.
That's something that is actively underway now. So that site map documentation and communications plan that we were referencing, those are critical to making sure that we can support those two major aspects of what was coming. The landing page is more than a landing page. It's literally going to be almost a micro website in its own. There's a vast quantity of information about PFA and varied audiences that we need to make sure that we're able to provide content for, so they don't have to fight to find content online. They don't have to scroll forever. It's easy for them to quickly navigate, find what they want, get what they need, and then have the takeaways or their questions quickly answered. So yes, 100% in agreement with everything that you said, and those have been the marching orders that we've also been provided from Sarah, Andy, and others internally. So we absolutely intend to be able to meet that and provide a robust amount of outreach to enable the success of the initial grant solicitation. I'm sorry I sound like I'm in a record player.
All right. Other comments for our guests or questions for our guests? Okay, well, seeing none, I want to thank you both for coming today, and we'll look forward to maybe having you back as some of these products start to roll out and it gets more into the implementation phase of your work. Thank you for being here, and thanks for your work.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. If there's any other questions for us, feel free to contact us independently or pass them along through Andy or Sarah at any point in time between now and the next time we should happen to meet.
Great, thank you. All right, well, let's go on to our next agenda item, which is the grant evaluation process. I sent a memo, which I hoped would be helpful if any of you had a chance to look at that, just to queue up what seemed like some of the key items and concerns in the process. So I think Andy's got some slides on this and is going to sort of help lead us both in an overview, but also to give us an opportunity to drill down on the specifics of some of the documents we've had. We have some real decisions to make or a chance to weigh in on some important matters here. So Andy, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bob. One second, let me just get my notes in order here. Talking and taking notes is always a fun thing to do here. All right. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the entire grant evaluation process. As I said earlier, it does involve a few different aspects. Again, I just want to thank the working groups that have worked to get everything to this point. It's been a very, very hard process to really think and conceptualize how we're going to review stuff, how we're going to do it in the most equitable way. We have consulted various other programs, just so you guys know, within ODFW and externally. And you know, as we get through the next few slides here, just understand this is just a working draft, just like everything else. We've got to a point where we now want to have that open discussion with the committee and just kind of get your ideas of it. And I think we have a pretty beefy agenda item to discuss it. So I have two slides here. Right now, I want to start off with discussing the review process of the grants from submission to award. I shared a flow chart with everyone. I'm just going to review that same flow chart with all of y'all. And then hopefully we'll enter into a larger discussion on the next slide where we'll get into the application, scope of work, the review worksheets, where it's just be more of that open discussion of the actual documents. Lastly, as we're looking at a fall solicitation. So we're hoping to launch these, wrap all this stuff up by the end of summer is the ideas. I think we're still on track for that. We are moving there. So with that being said, I'm gonna click on this guy and reshare my screen. So bear with me just a quick second, everyone, as I bring additional stuff over. All right, this should be coming in now. Flow chart, right? Okay. And I do apologize for those who may have tried to edit this. When I did send it out, it just doesn't allow you guys to edit it. But I wanted to share this initial flow. So a grant, essentially, this tree is working, the purple is the main line, all the way up until we get to execution. So I'm just gonna walk through this real quick, and then I'm gonna jump back to the slides and have a discussion about it and opinions, thoughts. As I'm going through this, think about the strengths or concerns that you may have of this review process. Is it sensible? We also need to start thinking about the technical review teams. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how we're going to split up regionality for that. Are we going to have 2 or 3? And then, of course, as we get to the end, we're going to talk about some ideas for funding packages and presentations to the committee and give some thought to that. But really, let's think about the strengths and weakness. So we're going to have a grant submission. It's going to get routed to myself.
Pardon me, Andy, can you just zoom in a little bit on that?
Oh, I
The type is
apologize.
pretty
Yes.
tiny on my screen. I don't know how it is for other folks, but
Here we go, guys. Is that a little bit better?
yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. I apologize for that. I have like a big screen in front of me. So we're gonna have a grant submission. It's gonna get to me. QA/QC, that's just a checkbox. Did they meet the minimum requirements? I'm just not looking at like quality of the application. Did they submit everything they're supposed to submit? Yada, yada. Yes, they did. Great. They got the check. They then move up to the technical review team. That is the first level of review. There would be technically 2 levels of review, which you'll see. They go to the technical review team, who will review and prioritize projects by region. So let's just arbitrarily say there's going to be 4 regions across the state. They will all be made up of what you see down here, the recommended team. This is just the initial recommendation. ODFW, stream bio, a forester, a MAC member, conservation, and a timber interest. That will be the technical review team. They're then prioritize proposals. So you've all seen that worksheet, which we'll talk about on the next slide about the material of that and the subject matter. But essentially, they'll go through the whole worksheet. They won't be scoring. We did take out scoring, but they will be giving comments and feedback on each proposal. They will then, as a regional technical review team, say that 20 proposals they get submitted in that region and put them in bins of critical need, high need, medium, low, not ready for funding, or something along those lines. They prioritize it based off those categories. That will then come back to Salem. I will then package it all up by region. I will attach to each proposal the technical review team worksheets that you guys have seen. I will also say what priority the sticker was put on them by that regional technical review team. Again, they are not going to be scored at this point. I will then deliver that packet to the review for the second level review to the MAC. And we're going to say 4 regions. So the MAC will get 4 different regions, and region 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's all the proposals. Here's all the reviews for each one. We will have a meeting after you guys have received those packages and presentations, presumably by Stream Bio for that region on those projects. That would be an opportunity for the MAC to engage with that Stream Bio and talk a little bit more about each project that they've reviewed at that time. We will then, after that meeting, it'll probably be a pretty long meeting depending on how many applications we actually receive. We will then, disperse. The MAC will then have their review worksheet that I've sent out. And each of you will recommend your top 5 projects that you want to see funded across the board. You'll then send all those documents back to me or in Salem to review them. We'll then work to compile 2 to 3 recommended funding packages based off the technical reviews, based off funding availability, of course, based off MAC considerations of what you guys want to see funded. We'll try our best to crosswalk your priority projects. And then we'll reconvene as a committee. The department, myself and Sarah will present on these funding packages to the committee. And then we'll be moving back up to where you guys will then vote at that point on what funding package you want to move forward. And then this is just kind of the process after, we'll go up to commission. It then goes through applicant interface with documentation, legal stuff, signatures, director's signatures, and execution, which we're hoping is going to be spring of next year is going to be our goal. But again, as we've discussed, it depends on the amount of proposals we get, how long DOJ will process, how much interface we need with them. But that's kind of the general flow that's being proposed to the committee for consideration at this time. Before we kind of get into the discussion of strengths and weaknesses of this, concerns or alternative ideas, is there any clarifying questions on this before I go back to the PowerPoint?
I guess maybe if you could just summarize again the MAC interaction. It seems like MAC members would be have work they need to do on a technical review team. So MAC members likely to be on one of those. Then there's an initial review of all the packages. You know, on the left of the screen there, you've got MAC review package prep.
Yeah, that's a note for me. So yeah, I will go over that once more. So on the technical review team, there will be a MAC member on there, at least one for a region. So they'll be able to give a more in-depth, detailed review if they'd like. And then this review package is I should put internal in front of that. That's for me to compile all the technical reviews before we move on to the MAC review.
Okay.
Like where we do the presentations by the technical review team, and then the 5 priority projects and comments by the committee.
So how many meetings do you think the MAC as a whole there do you envisage, you know, having this in front of them? I guess is what I'm wondering here. And I see Chris Allen has a hand up too, but Andy, if you could just.
Great question.
I'm just thinking about us getting this done by, you know, early next year. So we can make grants before the in-water work season. And people can hire contractors, be ready to go. And so, you know, the more meetings we have to discuss, obviously, the further it pushes it out.
Exactly. Great question. So we'll have that technical review team, and each region will be able to kind of decide on how often they want to meet as a group. I imagine that I would be a facilitator with that group as needed. So there would be one at least with technical review teams, or two. There'd be a kickoff and then a prioritization meeting with the technical review team. And then we'll move up to the actual MAC review, where we'll have the presentations by the technical review team to the committee of all the projects. So that would be 3 meetings. And then the 4th one would be when we approach with the funding packages. All right, here's our 4th meeting. Here's our 2 to 3 funding packages we, you know, recommend to fund what you guys want to. One of those 3. Does that make sense? So it's 4 meetings technically, with the 4th being the decision making.
Yeah, thank you. I see Chris, Jennifer, and Kristen. So Chris, please.
Hope you're muted,
Off mute, please, Chris.
Andy, could you scroll to our left a bit, and could you summarize again the makeup of the technical review teams and the thought behind who is represented on those?
Of course. So the technical review team, as it stands, recommended is ODFW stream, PFA stream bio, and ODFW ODF Forester for the region. One of the committee members, presumably outside of the region you reside in or work in, then a conservation and timber interest. This is initially what I just recommended based on the diversity of the group. I know there was initial discussion when we first started to talk about this process of getting committee members involved on the local level too, so they see more of the proposal. So that's why one of the committee members was recommended in there. But I could certainly see some redundancy with that if committee members are going to see it on the 2nd level. So I'm not opposed to removing the committee on that 1st level. And then, of course, the conservation and timber interest, because it just provides that, you know, that NGO, the non-governmental opinion essentially of what's happening with the proposal, right? One group conservation might see something very different than the timber, and what allows, because each one of these 5 members or 4 will be giving a worksheet, the committee will be able to review the interest of the conservation worksheet, the timber worksheet, the ODF worksheet, and the ODFW worksheet. So each proposal will have 4 different reviews on it that could give you 4 different takes on that proposal. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, largely. I guess what comes to mind when I'm thinking of a technical review team is that word technical, and just making certain that that initial review team is bringing the level of technical expertise to their review to serve us well. And I'm thinking of OWEB's process with their regional review teams. And they're really catering to an interagency group that has a number of experts reviewing these projects as a first cut. And I just want to make certain that these teams, as we're developing them here, have that level of on-the-ground expertise to provide the best initial assessment of proposals as possible. And then also, I see Stream Bio, I think of primarily representing fisheries interests, and knowing that a lot of our focal species are fish, but we also have wildlife species as well. So I want to make certain that that's represented on the technical review team.
I've got, thank you, Chris, for that. Jennifer, Kristen, Kate, and Heath, I see in the queue. Jennifer, please.
Yeah, thank you. Can you scroll to the right now to the level 2? I just, a clarifying question. I just want to make sure I understand. So they'll first going to have a review at the region, and then it comes to the level 2. And then on number 2, it says MAC review and recommend top 5. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding that even though we're having an initial review at the region, by the time we get there, everything's pushed together. Or are we trying to fund projects so that each region gets a project? That's what I'm trying to get at, is how do those two play together?
I'm sorry, I might not be understanding that question.
I think I understand it. It's an open question, I think, Jennifer. At this point, the way it's structured, they would all come together, and presumably the committee could potentially pick them all from one region. They wouldn't be required.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it's structured now. And just to be clear with everything, and to speak to you two, Chris, on the technical review team, this is just the first proposal we've got in front of us here. So, it's a good question you raise. I wonder in some ways if we should actually call them project review teams, if they're not really so technical. And if we really want the technical stuff, if that's really important to us, maybe we need to do more to ensure that that's present. So anyway, just a couple comments from me. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, please, Jennifer. Anything else on that?
Just one other question is, I don't really understand what a funding package is and how one package might vary from another.
Yeah, so
you could elaborate on that, please.
That's a very good question, and up for discussion. So the idea is that we recommend based off available funding. So this doesn't have to be this way, but we could say here's 2 funding packages. One, maybe is a little bit more conservation focused in some avenue. One's more working lands focused in the other avenue. But this is what fits within the available funding. This is what we believe we can process confidently to meet that in-water work period. Here's our recommendation based off all the reviews we've seen as the department. In those categories, it doesn't have to be those 2, right? We could choose, or it's not, or we just recommend 2 different funding packages in a sense, right? Here's bigger projects, but less, more funding, less bigger projects. Here's a lot more projects. Does that make sense? So it's variable on what we want to decide as that, but that's how I would see it as a funding package potential.
Thanks for that question and answer, Kristen.
So building, I guess, a bit on Chris's comments on the technical side of that team, another technical aspect of this work gets into the type of project. So I'm thinking about land acquisition or water acquisition projects, which may necessitate an entirely different level of legal review and understanding of those projects. And that's really a different skill set. So I know OWEB has developed some solutions over the years to handle those particular project types. And just thinking about how we might want to undertake that effort. And along those lines, thinking about the first solicitation and the timing of this. And I'm not sure that I support what I'm about to say, but we could consider certain project types being eligible in the first round if it takes longer for us to build our capacity to be able to handle some of the project types that have substantially more legal components to them, or other skill sets than we currently have established for this. Because I wouldn't want to slow down our initial solicitation if we needed to develop some of that. But Andy, maybe you and Sarah have already thought through how to handle that. But anyway, food for thought.
Thank you. I've noted that. That's a good consideration, especially for land acquisition. That's going to be a different kind of technical reviewer at that point.
Kate Wells, please.
My question has to do with all the way over to the end, the execution point, and how we're going to be defining that. Because unless we assume that all these projects come in with permits already cleared and in place, at least from our perspective, it would be really impractical to think that they're going to get money in the winter and then hit the ground in the next work window, because we might not be able to turn around a consultation. DSL might not be able to issue their permit. The Corps might not be able to issue their permit. You know, all these different layers of compliance have to happen. So, and that's like a really tight timeline. So I've just a note on expectations, I guess, there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kate. Very well noted. At least for this, what we're seeing on the screen now, execution was terms of just wet signature on project agreement. So this is not project completion or anything. This will just be, we've signed it. They're clear to proceed.
Okay, great. Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, Kate. Heath Curtis, please.
Thanks. First, I like the structure generally, in large part because I think I suggested it. But two, I think there, Chris's questions are good ones, and I might take a little different emphasis. My hope is that these regional teams, whether they're technical or not, take a laboring oar in helping us, winnow the pool of things I need to look at, right? That is to say, not just that those regional teams are doing technical work, but that they are expediting our review at the MAC level. And I think they do that by helping us prioritize on the basis of some of the critical questions, things like watershed context and otherwise. And so in that vein, kind of two thoughts. One, Bob, I kind of like your idea that those teams, as their composition is presently suggested, may be just like regional review teams. To the degree that we need technical review, then two things. One, I think it would need to be on a subset of the questions, a very specific subset of the questions that require technical expertise. I'm not really interested in assigning to the technical review teams policy questions, for instance. And so I think that, we could build in another layer for that, and it might very well be appropriate. Mm-hmm. But then that leads me to the next step, and Andy, this puts a little on you, and I suspect you don't want it. But from my perspective, getting like 6 sheets from 6 regional members on all of the projects that are put in front of us requires a great deal of work for me and for all of us. That's going to be, thousands of pages of work potentially. And so in my view, that step where you package it up for the MAC members, I really think that ODF and W should prepare summaries of those sheets for us. That is to say, here's the project, here's generally how the comments came together, here's the priority that it was, suggested. Here's maybe some notes about, some misgivings and give those to us. And so I think that those regional review teams serve a principal purpose of winnowing the field for us without affirmatively scoring and ranking, because I don't like that per se, but they do play a strong role in winnowing the field for us, and that it should come to us in a format that's more easily digestible than having to read 6 different reviewers, multi-page assessment of every project.
Thank you, Heath. Mark Stern, please.
Oh, well, Andy, I guess I like the flow of events as you've laid it out here. There's a lot of questions sort of within each step of the way. There's a lot of nitty gritty there to think about. Going back to Chris's comment, there's part of me that goes, well, somewhere in the review, my mind goes to, you've got listed species and covered species that NOAA and Fish and Wildlife Service might have knowledge and interest in, and how are you guys comfortable just sort of being one of a cast of characters here? Is there a way to get some of that more technical or programmatic consideration from the 2 agencies that deal with the listed species? So that's where I go to a little bit with that technical review team. It looks a little bit soft on of course, it depends who those members are, but it could be soft on some of the science of the need for the covered species there. I also look at that meeting, and if you have a technical review team, I guess I'm just thinking out loud, what is that going to take to make that happen? Well, you're going to have 4 technical review teams with maybe 5 people on each committee and reviewing, Bob, your example is maybe 25 projects each, and in terms of a time commitment for that technical review team, I'm thinking out loud, it's a considerable effort for the technical review team to get through those projects. I would also, in some ways, want each of the members of the technical review team to score, or however we're categorizing their projects, so that when that group came together, they'd at least be at a starting point. Maybe the technical review team, everybody's picked out a critical need project at first, and it sort of begins to clarify quickly, or could be a lot of discussion there. But I think you get my point on that one. The other place I guess I go back up to is on the level 2, it says review and recommend top 5 projects each. Do you mean each MAC person or?
Each MAC person, correct.
And I guess 5, I'm not sure why it's 5. Again, it depends how many projects we get, but if we get whatever it is, 50 to 100, and the regional or the review teams knock it down some, I don't know why we recommend 5 versus we recommend the ones we think ought to be funded. And then I guess my last question a little bit, and it's a little bit tricky when you go up to the 5 categories of priority need and so forth. There's, at least in reviewing the OCRF projects, there's always a distinction between what's the highest need and sort of what's the best proposal. Because sometimes you can have a proposal that's sort of trying to get at a high need, but it may not be a very good proposal in terms of the strength of the proposal. So I think somewhere in that ranking of projects, you have to be able to consider, is it a priority need for the covered species, but also is it a strong project that's actually to deliver what it says it's going to deliver? Because you might have something that's not the highest need, but if it's really well scripted, it might be a more efficient use of funds.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of a brain dump there, but I guess my point is, I think there's a lot of nuances and nitty gritty within each of those steps that's yet to be daylighted.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for that. Mark, I'm going to call on myself briefly, and then I see Heath has his hand up there. I think there's really good conversation here, and I think you're right, Mark, that there is a lot to decide and clarify at the different steps, particularly making sure that the reviews are sound, what's happening, and that they're able to be completed in a timely manner. I did want to note that the main project application, scope of work questions, as I look at the limits, the character limits there, it looks like we're looking at about a 30-page document. And I guess I'm wondering if that's a typical or average length. That seems potentially to be a long document if we've got a lot of those, or that they could be redundant as well. And that doesn't include any attachments. And there's a variety of attachments we'll be requiring as well. So I guess I just want to flag the potential workload and the size of the scope of work, and you know, whether those character limits are set at the right. They may be. I'm just not sure about it. My experience at times is that people tend to go right up to character limits rather than stopping short for fear that they'll be seen as, you know, not having adequately answered something. So, Heath.
Andy, I didn't know if you had any comments on that. And Bob, did you have a question in there about whether that size is the standard?
Yeah, I guess whether that's typical. I'm sure, you know, some folks on here have been applying for these or reading those, or maybe these even seem like that's not a long application, actually. And I don't have a good compass.
I think my response would be to agree with you on that, Bob. And I think if we can streamline some of the questions too, I think that's going to be helpful with it. On average, I think the response character is 5,000 characters, I believe, including spaces, which came out to roughly about half or a third of a page for a possible response. And it was kind of arbitrarily put in there when I initially just did the first characters for each question. I'm looking forward to, you know, after we get past this discussion, hopefully today we can actually get into that scope of work a little bit and try to streamline that with the group, because I have the same concern about the length of these proposals possibly being submitted. Thanks, Heath, for that opportunity.
I just want to clarify though, and we can have some more conversation about this. And this is me just, you know, using Google to help me. What I'm seeing is that about 5,000 character limit, including spaces, is about 3 to 4 pages of prose. So that may be wrong. Anyway, we just want to make sure we know what we're asking for here when we get at that question. But if others have thoughts, including you, Heath, obviously on that amount of character limit question, I'm eager to hear them.
I don't. I'll defer to experts on this. I honestly don't have a lot of relativity. Mark, I just wanted to respond to your comments a little bit. I think you're right that there's going to be some like trade-offs between like the priority of the project vis-a-vis the species relative to the competency of the applicant and how well they've thought it out. But like when I was kind of trying to grapple with the grant evaluation criteria, I couldn't figure out a good way to be assured that if we were assigning points or some such thing, that we would actually capture those trade-offs. What I fear is that it's really just going to take humans kind of thinking about that and saying, this is one that I think looks better to me on those elements than this other one. And my hope, and again, kind of returning to the point I was making earlier, my hope is that I don't actually have to think as hard as that first group did when we are assessing them at the MAC. That is to say, my hope is that they really kind of do the brain damage to identify those that among the various criteria that they are assessing really stand out and give me a really running head start on selecting from among those. And I didn't know if I agree with you that those are important questions, but I get a little queasy when we start, you know, assigning points to them. And I didn't hear you suggest that, but that formalizing how to grapple with those questions to me presents some peril in elevating projects that maybe weren't as strong overall.
All right. Thanks, Heath, for that. I saw Andrew's. I don't see Bob. I think he might have got kicked off. But Andrew, you got a hand up?
Mark, if you want to respond to Heath, go ahead.
Mark?
Oh, yeah, I guess I was gonna partly agree, Heath. I don't want to assign points either because that's laborious and hard. I think and you might have seen it in some of my comments in the different documents. I think it sort of gets to me, what is the scope, scale, and impact? Is the scope, scale, and impact of the project commensurate with the funding request? And somewhere kind of embedded in that is that gut reaction of, you know, for what we're buying, are we going to get a good outcome for what's intended? And to me, that's sort of the overriding thought through all of these. And, you know, if the technical review team can begin to pair that out, that's great. But it's not always clear. And at the same time, people can write really good proposals, and it's not easy sometimes to figure out which are the best proposals. And a lot of times what you could end up with is a lot of really good proposals. And then it's really gnarly to figure out, of the really good proposals, which ones do you want? But
And selfishly, Mark, if I may, I'm trying to avoid thousands of hours at the Mac, right? That is to say, I really would like to offload some of that labor to these regional teams, and that they grapple with a smaller subset and elevate them to me in a way that's digestible and understandable. So if this process doesn't accomplish that, I would hope we could have a conversation about how it might.
yeah,
Andrew, please.
Yeah, just on the length topic, relating it back to what Heath just said, which is it depends on who's looking at it, who the audience is in terms of the appropriate length. And in my experience, for example, in the Columbia Basin Water Transactions Program at NIFWIF, the staff that was reviewing these to tee them up for the technical committee, they did look at 25, 30 page proposal documents. But by the time it got to the equivalent of who we are at the MAC, it was consolidated and concise summary of what was in there. So the length question really gets to information and what is needed for that robust technical review to set it up for then our consideration.
Sarah.
I think we're really lucky in this committee to have the expertise that we do. Am I frozen? Can you guys see me?
Nope, you're great. We hear you.
Okay. I looked frozen to myself. You know, between, you know, all of you have either, you know, been specialized in grants or are on other advisory boards and kind of are familiar with all the different workflows and processes. And so that's been reassuring to me, who's somewhat totally new to developing a brand new grant program. And I'm really relying on your expertise here. The one thing that you know, for example, I was like, what do you mean you're not scoring? But after Andy explained to me what the working group had discussed and why you hadn't gone that route, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And I really trust your expertise. I think what the test is for me as we continue to shape this is it transparent and repeatable enough that if we're challenged by an applicant who's not selected, do we feel confident that our process is fair? And you know what I'm trying to say? Like, to me, that's the test that we have to ask ourselves as we're developing this. Is it transparent? Is it fair? Is it repeatable?
And if I may, I mean, like, I've heard that concern from the agency, and I'm sensitive to it. Of course, in order to make it perfectly repeatable, you're kind of on a sliding scale. That is to say, there's a great deal more formalizing and rigor that you could introduce to a process to produce exactly the same outcome, no matter who the humans were, applied every time. And I don't imagine that that's your objective. And I think that I think that when dealing with humans on these kind of policy and priority issues, I think the degree to which we move in that direction needs to be informed by how likely it is we are to be challenged in that vein. That is to say, by somebody who was not selected, and the way in which those arguments have gone before. I don't have any relativity there. My general sense is that that doesn't happen. That is to say, I'm not aware of OWEB having been sued by an applicant who was not selected because OWEB's selection process was arbitrary. If that, I'm happy to be corrected on that count, but hypothetically, if that were true, that is to say, given the many years and many grant cycles that OWEB has pursued deploying these funds, I think that we may not need to err quite so rigorously toward repeatable, and maybe can just authentically, as good people and smart people with kind of mutually aligned objectives, take our best shot at what we think are the most valuable projects, notwithstanding the fact that that introduces some discretion and unrepeatability.
Thank you for that, Heath. Other comments? Fran, I don't think we've heard from you, or Sarah, anything on the overall process here?
Nice to be called on. Thanks, Bob. It's a lot to process. Been thinking through this a lot, and I agree with a lot of what everyone's been saying. I like the process. I do want to make sure that we're fair. I like what you said, Heath, about, that we're good people, and we're going to do our best with that. But I do think there need to be some measures to keep that in place, like and those are in there to, we want to, for me, I think it's really important that through this process that we're honoring what these projects are meant to accomplish, and that just to really make sure that we're focused on accomplishing those goals. So I like the discussion so far, and I appreciate everybody's points. And I think in general, I'm mostly in agreement with what's been said so far.
Great, thank you. Mark Stern?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back, a clarifying question maybe for Andy about the funding packages. I still wasn't sure if that, when you said they would provide 2 or 3 funding packages, was that then with the idea that the MAC would pick one of the 3 funding packages? Or,
Correct.
Okay, so.
Mark, the way I thought about it was that, we're all going to have a little bit disparate advice. He's going to get like a lot of input from the MAC, and we're going to have that meeting, and it may not be that there's like an obvious pathway. Andy's going to have some dollars to work within, and I think he doesn't want to be the person who just takes this and just arbitrarily is the guy who says, all right, it's these projects because they fit the dollars and this is what I heard. I think he's going to want a little cover. And so it occurred to me that he could prepare some alternatives that match the funding availability and kind of match what he thinks he heard in that meeting and bring that to us. And then we could give it the final blessing for forwarding it to the commission.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. That catches me up there.
Yeah,
I think that's right. I guess I would like to say I guess I kind of envisage the committee maybe having a longer meeting, an in-person meeting, where we, which is really our primary discussion and feedback meeting for the grant, for the monies. And I assume it would be, in the first quarter of next year when we hopefully are making this decision. The process of the project reviews are complete. We've had time to look over the materials. It may be that the committee itself can come to some decisions. I guess, we just don't know how many are going to come in, how it's going to fit the money that's available. It may be that folks sort of do center in on a set of projects as really being the superior ones that match the funding available. But it may well be that we don't. And just as Heath is saying, we need the ODF&W to help us match some things like timeline and priorities and do some more processing. So I'm not against that step, but I guess I would be hopeful that maybe we didn't actually need to take it. It does obviously mean another meeting so that we do this processing, and then ODF&W comes back again to tell us what the packages are. So anyway, there's that straight timeline element as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Bob, maybe that when the technical review teams, the regions are presenting to the committee, maybe that's like a 2-day meeting or something we have, or after that is when we have a longer discussion with just the MAC about the projects, and that's an opportunity for that too. I like that idea of that being that in-person discussion and presentation, maybe opportunity. This is great. I really appreciate this feedback. Bob, I was gonna, unless there's any more discussion, I was gonna move on to the next, just to discuss the scope of work and cover page, the worksheets, just to kind of get that out in the air. Are we wanting to move on to that?
I think we sure can. I mean, each of those documents is pretty substantial with quite a bit of content in them. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes left in the meeting here. So yeah, why don't we start with that bigger scope of work document. If there's anything you want to say in a prefatory way, obviously we welcome that, Andy, or folks who work on it. But otherwise, this is a time to give feedback to Andy about it.
And I want to just note the discussion we've had has been really great. I've noted it. We have a working group meeting coming up, so I've highlighted stuff that we can incorporate and whatnot with that working group. So I really do appreciate it. Of course, as always, with all of our documents, please don't hesitate to track change, comment, and send to me as soon as possible, so I can incorporate stuff. So the scope of work, we started a little bit of discussion. At this point, I don't plan on sharing screen, but I just want some open discussion about it, opinions. The character limit was, great intro to this. Again, that scope of work's about 3 pages of questions that we're looking at, about 20-something questions. We've worked to streamline it a bit. I'm sure there's some more redundancy we can take out. But before we kind of go to questions, I know Heath, Andrew, and I think Kristen is on that group. Did you guys want to add anything as a preface to this discussion, or should we just get right into it?
Go for it.
Okay. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess one thing that'd be helpful for me is if you can post somewhere which are the working groups that are active and what their meeting schedule is and who's involved. Just that sort of background. That'd be helpful.
Will do. I'll put that in that Google folder, which I'll share with you guys later.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other thoughts on the scope of work? Was there any question that we thought was just not relevant? Was there the length of it too many questions? Did we not ask something that we should have asked?
It seems strong to me, I'll just say, and I appreciate the work that folks have put in it. I know some of you are really experienced at either receiving grants or applying for grants or giving grants. So thank you for the team that's been put in it. I've already offered mine about just, wondering if the length is something we could pare down, or making sure we know what the character limits mean, and to avoid redundancy. You don't want someone to basically describe their project at the start where there's no character limit and then just end up describing it again and again in the sections that follow. So that would be my one concern there. Pardon me for jumping in. Mark.
Yeah, I made numerous comments in the on the online version, so I'm not going to go into those, but I guess I'd raise 2 just general observations. One is that in a variety of the documents, including the OARs and the MAC operating procedures, the grant scope of work, and the cover page application, there's a thing about project type, and the list of project types varies among documents. So we could have a different discussion about what they should be, but whatever they are, I think they should be the same throughout.
Actually, I would love to have a little discussion about that, Mark, because that's a very, very good point. Thank you.
The other overarching one that I find a little hard to track through all this is sort of the concept of monitoring, because it again is mentioned in the different documents in different ways. I'm not sure if we're requiring monitoring, what monitoring means, and how we want them to convey that. There's one reference that says you know, in the grant guidelines, there's a template for monitoring, but that hasn't been developed yet. And I think about it a little bit as monitoring is critical in the evaluation. We want to make sure we ask the question in a way that allows us to evaluate if they're actually going to do it. So I just saw that as another larger scale topic that needed some more conversation.
Andy, you want to respond to that one?
Yeah, great questions, Mark. For the monitoring, very good insight. As of now, the program, we're not requiring post-project monitoring, and this is something that the grant guidelines would clarify, that it is optional to apply in the grant fund. When in the application, they can request post-project monitoring if they want. They could put it in their original proposal also and just say, hey, we recommend monitoring because of X, Y, and Z and our expertise. But as it stands, we've had, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this committee's discussed previously, we don't want to put extra burden on these applicants in the long term. So we're not requiring that long-term post-project monitoring. But that being said, Mark, you have a very good point that, you know, I have it on the docket sometime next year for us to be discussing as a committee. What does success mean in terms of achieving the habitat conservation plan, the goals, and monitoring is a key aspect of that, or being able to quantify that. Maybe that's something where we ask the university to come in and do some performance metrics and whatnot. But as it stands, yeah, monitoring is not required. They can request it. There's nothing that's saying they'll get scored against if they don't put monitoring into their project. Hopefully that answered that question. And then your project.
Well, just to comment, and I'm not lobbying here for it one way or another, but the OARs, and I'm reading verbatim, say all project proposals shall require a short-term and long-term maintenance and monitoring plan.
Well, I guess that isn't it. So. Good question. Can't really say much other than that. You pulled that out. So the short term, I would imagine, is within their project, though, within the project timeline. Long term, probably shouldn't be in there, actually, now that I'm thinking about that. Yeah. I don't see why the long term would be in there in the first place. It should just be the short term. I guess better revised is within their project timeline is monitoring. Thank you for that.
Kate Wells, please.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that long-term is in there because the services need the assurance that the benefits are going to actually accrue in order to know that there's going to be adequate offset for the covered activities. So I don't know of another way to get at that with any certainty that we need to issue an ITP. And generally, like in our consultations, we require long-term monitoring. So
thank you.
I don't know why long-term monitoring wouldn't be in there in some capacity, even if it's not done by the people that do you know, the actual project itself. You know, if it's turned over to some long-term steward.
Right. And of course, there's different kinds of monitoring. One question is just, you know, did they actually do the project? And is someone going to check on it regularly to see that it's still functioning versus, you know, did it provide the function that we thought it would? Did it have the scientific or ecological effect, which is oftentimes a much more complicated question to answer. Sarah, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna request that Jennifer, put you on the spot a little bit, Jennifer, here. As you're working on the HCP, how is the draft HCP currently contemplating providing those assurances to the services? Like, what's the interplay between that and the mitigation program?
That's a really good question. That part of the HCP is kind of under review right now. It's we have the mitigation program as one of our conservation measures. And we just got some initial feedback from our PFA author group, but we've not sent that to the services for their review yet. We don't have, essentially what we're writing in the HCP is currently just describing what's in the PFA report for the mitigation conservation measure. It needs to, we don't feel like we can put anything in there that would then change and direct ODF and W's work. We're more taking what you guys have and describing it in the HCP. So it's a bit of a weird situation just because, the HCP is under Department of Forestry, but the mitigation grant program and the entire mitigation conservation measure is under ODF and W. So I need to get that content to you guys to review as well. That's been on my mind. So I was sorry, that was sort of a non-answer, but I don't have an answer.
Well, I think
That's
it just, like I said in the comments, I think this monitoring discussion,
Mhm.
there just needs to be a lot more discussion about monitoring and what's going to be required of these grants relative to the expectations of the HCP. And so,
Yeah.
Andy, I don't think you have to have the answers today. This just shines a light on the need for more discussion.
Yeah, and we would not have any mandate in our adaptive management and monitoring chapter for monitoring for mitigation projects. If this group decides that they want to ask for monitoring, then we'll reflect that in the HCP, but it's not going to be directional the other way.
And it sounds like it's worth us at least making sure we're comfortable with the OAR language on monitoring there, or if we just need to temper it a little bit to just be careful. I mean, we want to obviously address the important need that Kate identified, that the services are going to want the information about the projects that are being done and the extent and character of mitigation. And monitoring is going to be important for that. So, but we don't want to exclude too many projects because there's a long-term monitoring associated with every single project that we provide. So anyway, there's a tension there, I think. Other comments on the scope of work document? We are running short of time. Okay, well, let's go ahead to the what we're calling the application cover page, which I'd frankly like to be renamed as, or let's call it at least pages. Seems like this is really the main project summary that we're getting in that document. So, Andy, you want to talk about that one briefly?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the project summary page is essentially a 2-page document, 2 or 3-page document. Third page is just signatures, that reviews the project on a very high level. It allows an opportunity for departments, the committee, to pull the cover sheet and understand pretty much everything about that project that you're going to need to know for the most part, ranging from an abstract project type to checking off a box of what species are benefiting from the project under the Habitat Conservation Plan. It also, on the last page, kind of discusses a file naming convention and stuff for applicants and some reminders for them so they know what to submit and all that good stuff. And that's kind of that for the most part. It's just a summary of everything. And it will be in a fillable PDF form. So if you see a checkbox or a circle here or yes, no, that would be something that they can check or circle in the PDF. And while we are on the application, we are still looking at interim grant management systems, just to put that on everyone's mind. We're also working on that. Any questions on the application, concerns? Anything we might have missed out that you might want to know?
I'll just note that this document does address the permit issue that was raised earlier, like, do you have your permits or where are you in process with permits? And it also has a question on post-project maintenance funding, just asking if that's being requested. So that's similar to monitoring away, sort of what's the long-term component of this project. Any comments or questions on this more summary initial document? Okay, well, let's go to the TRT, technical review team or initial review team or whatever we're going to call this one, review sheet.
So yeah, those are two different review worksheets that I've sent out to you guys. The technical review team essentially has, I believe, 4 or 5 areas of focus as they're reviewing documents. They will have on there, I believe it's still on there, a check mark of recommend for funding or recommend with considerations for funding. This is what they're going to use to review each project. Either I'm going to summarize that, or ODFW will summarize that, or deliver it directly to you guys. But and then the MAC review sheet, it has on the last page all the areas of consideration, of course. But it also has, you know, the 5 priority projects that each member would want to recommend. So this is where your guys' interface will be also. And they're just rough drafts, but any kind of concerns or comments on those as they stand? Or areas that we may have missed that we didn't bring up for focus in there? Because this is what, you know, when a review team's on their 10th proposal, they're going to be looking at this because it might be a little brain dead or whatnot. But this will remind them of what a priority is. So that's something we want to know. We want to make sure we put the correct bullets in there.
So this is probably the time when I bring up my my request, and it probably might require more conversation than we have time for left today. But for both of these worksheets, and I've discussed this before with this whole group and then with a smaller team, I think, you know, the object of these projects is to provide mitigation for the covered species, and to do that in the most efficacious and efficient manner possible, the best bang for our buck to mitigate the impacts of incidental take. You know, from my perspective, that doesn't require on its face, you know, the retirement of timberlands. And Kristen talked about acquisitions before, and I think there are many ways in which property can be acquired and continue to be worked. But, you know, in both of those documents, I've added a bullet that says, I've suggested a bullet that says the project does not retire working timberlands unless doing so is necessary to meet the needs of covered species. And I think that's a fair request. I thought about just stopping with the first half of that. It just says it doesn't retire working timberlands. But I think to the degree that retiring working timberlands is necessary to meet the needs of covered species, and I can see us quibble about the word necessary, but I like that for obvious reasons. I think then, you know, that may be appropriate. There may be circumstances where taking a block of ground and committing it to, you know, non-management on behalf of the covered species may be an important thing to do depending on the circumstances and context. But what I really don't want to do, and what a lot of the industry is watching for this, is that this would be a large pool of dollars used to take working timberlands out of production. And while I would like to draw a hard line on that, generally from a policy perspective, I don't know that I've got the room to do it here, but I would like to make the request, and I think it's a fair request, that that we only accommodate that where it's necessary to meet the needs of the covered species. So that's my pitch.
Well, it's a good pitch, and I think we should pick it up next time, as we've just about run out of time for today. I want to, unless there's a final comment or thought to share, I guess I will just convey that Chad Washington has suggested something similar in the chair and vice chair meeting we had, what he said. Kristen and Sarah, maybe, yeah, please address, and then we can close things up.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think that's an important topic to have a more robust conversation about, and we don't have time for that now. So hopefully that could be on the agenda for a future meeting.
Yeah, I think we should.
And I just wanted to, unrelated to Heath's comment, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to Heath and Kristen for making time to join the Fish and Wildlife Commission tomorrow on our, the commission is taking a tour of on a lot of different topics tomorrow near Newport. And one of those stops is going to be at Simpson Creek on some Weyerhaeuser property. And Kristen and Heath have volunteered to spend some time with the commission just talking about private forest accord and sort of how we came to where we are today and where we're headed with the mitigation fund. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. We're at our 2 o'clock. Andy, anything closing from you, please?
No, we're good. Thank you everyone for the comments and hard work. Please send me edits as always, as soon as possible, so I can incorporate stuff into the working groups. You guys will get an email from me with some post-action
And
items.
thanks to everybody on the working groups for all the effort you're putting in, which I know is often not visible to everyone, but is much appreciated. Okay, thanks everyone, and good night.